So the next chapter is origin and evolution of life. Okay. So we'll see with, before we get into actual evolution, we'll just have an introduction to see how the earth originated. Yes, the origin of the earth. So the very common theory for the origin of earth is the Big Bang theory, and that explains the origin of the universe. It says that the Big Bang theory states that the universe, the beginning was an explosive beginning. Yes, so the universe was formed because of an explosive beginning or explosion, which was about 15 billion years ago. Yes, 15 billion years ago, an explosion which led to the origin of the earth, and that's what is the Big Bang theory. Now, according to this, what it says that the universe, it is composed of stars, clouds, that is clouds of gases, dust particles, yes, and these particles, they aggregate to form the galaxies, or the solar system. Yes, the solar system. So actually it is said that what happens is these gaseous clouds, when they just start breaking up because of the gravity, into very fine atoms and particles, and these particles later get aggregated to form the entire solar system. That is what it states. Now, after this Big Bang theory came up many other theories relating to the origin of life. Yes, so some of the theories are, one is the special creation, which states that the life on earth is very divine. That is, it's more a spiritual way of telling. That is, it's a supernatural event. Yes, it says that life after the origin, life has not changed yet. So more of a spiritual belief. Next came the spontaneous generation, which is also known as the abiogenesis. And this theory states that life originated from a lifeless matter. Yes, so an object which is without a life, from which originated the life. So an example to say that from mud originated fishes, then moist soils from which originated the frogs, and so on, and insects from decaying matter. So this was another theory, though we know now why on a decaying matter do we have insects, because they are decaying and so the insects sits on it. But those days, the beginning, they thought that from a non-living, like the decaying matter, which is a non-living, from which originated the insect. This was the theory. After this came the biogenesis. And this was actually by Louis Pasteur, who states that life originated from an already existing life. So to explain this, what he did is, he had two flasks which he had completely sterilized so that there were no living system inside that, and then he closed it, airtightly he closed it. And into which, before closing, he added some killed yeast. Yes, and he closed it. And after a few days, when it he observed, he tried to show that no organism originated from this yeast which was killed. So there was another flask which was kept open, and in which he was able to find some living organisms. So by this experiment, he showed that from non-living, there will not be any origin of a living organism, but it is only from a living system does a living organism originate. Okay. The next theory is the extraterrestrial or cosmic origin. This is, according to this, the scientists believe that life originated from the outer space. Yes, so that unit or that particle which contained life is what is called as spores. Those days they call them as panspermia. This was transferred to different planets, and from which originated the living system. Regarding this, there is not much of an evidence to tell about that. Do you get it? And finally came the chemical evolution of life, which was actually explained by Oparin and Haldane. So they said that on the earth, whatever are the conditions prevailing, based on that condition, life originated because of varying chemical reactions. Yes. So they explained further that that is from a non-living inorganic molecule. Yes, a non-living inorganic molecule could have given rise to different organic molecules, which was then transferred into a colloidal system to produce life. And this particular theory, chemical evolution of life, was to some certain extent it was accepted, because the modern concept also is based on this chemical evolution about the origin of life. So this is one which is more widely accepted than any of the other theory. Okay, now we will see what is evolution. Evolution refers to a sequence of changes. Yes, when I mean the changes, it's not all of a sudden, a gradual change, a slow change, which would have taken place in the primitive organisms over millions of years, from which new species have originated. So, in a living organism, over the years there could be some small changes which have occurred in that, and later over the years, as they get aggregated, you find that there is a new organism which is formed, and this is what we call as evolution. So any organisms which share some features which are common, yes, then those will be more related, or rather, in very simple term to tell, any of the animals that have more similarities are more closely related. Am I clear? And some of the sources which helps us to understand this evolution are like homologous, analogous, vestigial organs, and atavism. These are some of the concepts which help us to understand evolution, and we'll be seeing about that one by one. Okay, first we'll see about homologous organism. Organs, that is how homologous organs helps us to understand that evolution has occurred because of some of the changes that had occurred in the primitive organism over the years. Okay, so homologous organs means what? Organs that have a same fundamental structures, but the function could be different. That is, the structurally they are similar, but function wise they are different. To give an example for this is the wings of birds and hands of humans. See, both of them, we do the same function. The hands of the human or the wings of the birds do the same function, but the structure is totally different. Do you understand? I'm sorry to tell, they have the same structure. They have the same structure, though they do a different function. Excuse me, once again I repeat, that is homologous organism. Homo means same. So organs which have the same structure, but the function is different. For example, the wings of birds and that of the hands of the human. If you see, the structure wise, in the hand and the wings, They show in wings also you have the bones, they are present, and the bones that are present in the hands of the human and that of the wings are the same, but the function wise they may be different. Do you get it? Function wise they use this for flying and we use it for holding. Yes, the function wise they are different, but structure wise it is the same. Do you get it? Okay. So similarly you can have many other examples like the flipper in the case of whales and in the bat's wing. So flipper means what? That paddle like structure, that is between the finger like structures you have a thin skin, yes, which connects them. That's what is called as flippers. So those flippers in the case of whales and the wings of the bats, they look alike in the structure, though they have different functions. Yes, so from this homologous organs, what do we understand? That the structure is similar, which means they could have inherited, or all these would have started from a common ancestor. Do you understand? Or rather, at the developmental stage, all of them would have had a same, that is a similar nature of the embryos, and slowly as they develop over the years, with there could have been changes that would have led to the formation of a new organism or new animal. Do you get it? So this is one evidence to show about the common ancestry from which it could have deviated. Next is analogous organs. Analogous organs means organs which have similar function but they have a different structure. Yes, like the wings of insects and wings of birds. Wings of birds, I told you, they have all those bones present. But in the case of insect wings, there are no such bones or anything, but they are made up of some chitinous material. But function-wise, if you see, they use, both of them are used for flying. Do you get it? So analogous organs refers to the organs which have a similar function, but they have a different origin. Do you get it? You can take the example of a bird's wing and a bat's wing and an insect wing also can be taken. So in all this you find that the function of the wings is mainly used for flying. Yes, but the basic structure is different. Okay. Next is vestigial organ. Vestigial organ means organs which are non-functional in the present situation, but once upon a time it was functional. So when I mean once upon a time, this organ, it is still present in all living system, but we don't use it. But in the ancestors, it could have been functional. So an example, very good example is the appendix. Appendix, in all the humans we do have appendix, but we know right now we don't have any function. It's a vestigial organ, that is, it has no specific function to tell. Do you get it? But it could have been that in the ancestor they could have had some function. Yes, that is this is one thing. Another, you have the wisdom tooth. Yes, we say we have there's a wisdom tooth, but wisdom tooth as such, even if it is not present, it is not going to disable a person. Do you get it? So it doesn't have any specific function as such to tell. Yes. Okay. Next is atavism. Atavism means it is a character which reappears in an individual. That is, an ancestral characters which reappear in an individual. For example, the rudimentary tail. Yes, tails which are present in a newborn babies, or the thick hair on the human body. So we say that before the human beings, the apes, all of them, that was the organism from which the humans have been evolved. That is what the theory states. So in them you find these tail and thick hairs over the body. So they could be in a human system where tail could be present, though not in everybody it is seen, and similarly thick hairs on the body. So when such a character appears, then we call that as atavism. So something which has was present in the ancestor, in the present species or present organism, it is not there, but then it could reappear. You get it? So that is about the atavism. Next is evidences from embryology. Yes, evidences from embryology. How it is going to tell that evolution has occurred over the years. So in this, what we do is we study, we compare the embryo of the different organisms, that is from a primitive organism to the highest organism. We compare the developmental stage. And it is understood that when we compare the developmental stage, the early stages of development is very similar in almost all the animals. For example, all the vertebrates from fishes to mammals, they show a same type of development in the early stages of embryo. You get it? And later, the stages of development, there are certain specific stages in which certain changes could have occurred. Do you get it? Okay. Next is biogenetic law or recapitulation theory. Now this biogenetic law recapitulation theory, it was put forward by Ernst Haeckel. This actually supports the embryology. That is, I was telling you how the embryo, the initial stages of development is same. So this is to show that the stages of development shows that all of them have a common ancestor. So it actually states that ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny. Ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny. So what does this mean? Ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny means the stages of development in the organisms is of different, now we know it is different phylum. For example, fish, frog, or what to tell, reptiles or birds. If we take the initial stages of development, it is the same. It shows that there is a common evolution. That is, all of these animals, they share some common ancestry, and during the course they could have deviated or they could have expanded from that. Do you understand? When I mean expanded, as we go higher and higher, there are certain special characters which have developed. Okay. Next is, so we have the evidences from embryology. Now we have evidences, I'm sorry, let me just change this. It is evidences from paleontology. Evidences from paleontology. Yes. Now what does paleontology means? Paleontology means it is the study about the fossils. Fossils means those dead remains of the plants or the animals which was buried under the earth, and we do have the impressions about that. Yes. So the study of the fossil, the branch of science that deals with the study of the fossil, is what is called as paleontology. Yes. So paleontology also gives us some evidence about evolution, that is, the ancestors are common from which it has diverged. So the father of paleontology is Leonardo da Vinci, is the father of paleontology. Okay. So this helps us to tell that the invertebrates and the vertebrates, at some point there is some common link between them, and after which during the years they could have gradually deviated from that, or rather they could have developed certain special characters, and hence they would have become more complex. To give a best example for this, it is the Archaeopteryx. Archaeopteryx is known as the oldest fossil bird. Yes? So this was a bird which was found in Jurassic period. That is the era. Yes? Like how we say 21st century, those days the era, they were divided into different eras. Yes, or period. So one such period was known as the Jurassic period. So this Archaeopteryx is a bird which was found in the Jurassic period, and the analysis of the characters shows that it shares some of the characters of the reptiles and some characters of the birds. So this Archaeopteryx is believed to be a connecting link between the reptiles and birds. Now what are those characters which it shares? That is, it had wings with feathers, that was a character of a bird. Then it had a long tail, clawed digit, then conical teeth, which was similar to that of a reptile. So this is to show how how the changes have occurred from a lower to a complex one. Do you get it? So they share some sort of a similarity, and as years goes by, because of varying conditions, they could have developed certain characters and helped them to evolve into a higher organism. So this Archaeopteryx is one example to tell that the origin of life shares a common ancestry. Okay. Next is the theories of evolution. So there were so many who had put forward varying theories. So I told you as earlier that evolution is a gradual change. So there were a number of theories which were put forward, and of which the two of them, that is two naturalists whose theory is being accepted, as one is the Darwin's theory and the other one is Lamarck's theory. Understand? So the Darwin's theory. So Darwin's theory, if you see, Darwin was the one who said that he had written a number of books, and one of the famous book is The Origin of Species, in which he had given a detailed description about how life could have, or the different species have originated. He had done a number of experiments. Anyway, from all his experiments, whatever was the principle that was derived is, let's see on to that, the principles of the Darwinism. So the first one is overproduction. Overproduction means that is any living system has the ability to reproduce. Yes, so when they reproduce so that the progeny, they resemble their parent, and they could be produced in large number or a smaller number depending upon the complexity. Do you get it? So if you take to the smaller level, normally the organisms, they multiply in a geometrical ratio. Yes, so because of this, that is 2 will become 4, 4 can become 8, 8 into 16, and so it is a more geometric manner. Now because of this production, such sort of a reproduction, there could be an increased population. Yes, so increased population is a result, or rather overproduction is a result of the increased reproduction ability. You get it? Okay. Next one, the struggle for existence. Now, because of this overproduction, what will happen? The individuals, the living system, it be a plant or it be an animal, there would be a struggle for existence. Do you get it? If I say it is a plant, in an area, if you have number of plants, they don't have a space. They don't get proper food. They will not get proper light because everything would be crowded. So similarly, it is applicable even to the animals. So overproduction can lead to struggle of existence. So there would be a struggle between the living system, who would survive and who would not survive. Now, what would be the struggle? The struggle could be for food. It could be for the space. Yes, so these could be some of the factors for which there could be a struggle. Okay, now the struggle could be of two types. It could be either intraspecific struggle or it could be interspecific struggle. When I mean intraspecific struggle, it is the competition for existence between the individuals of the same species. You get it? Between the individuals of same species. Now, interspecific struggle means it is a competition between the individuals for existence of different species. Individuals belonging to different species would fight with each other either for food or for shelter for their survival. Am I clear? And another one factor for struggle would be the environmental factors. Environmental factor means the adverse condition like flood, drought or extreme temperatures would, because every organism need not have to withstand. Yes, there would be these adverse conditions could take the life of certain organisms, and those which survives are the ones who will be able to withstand. Do you get it? Okay. So these are some of the factors that that an individual or a living system faces, or rather it is a struggle between the organisms. And why does this struggle occur? Because there is an overproduction. Okay. Next feature is the variation. Now, variations, it could be a plant or an animal. These variations is a characteristic features which we see in everybody. No two persons are the same. There is some sort of a variation. Now, the variation could be a small variation or a large variation. Now, small variations are the one which is very important for evolution. Small variations are one which is very important for evolution. So, after years, they could lead to the origin of a new species. Now, these variations, whether it be a small or a larger variation, the variations could be either favorable or unfavorable variation. So, favorable means which is beneficial for the organisms, and unfavorable means which is useless for an organism. So, the variations which are beneficial in a living system, those organisms would survive. Yes, that would be the natural selection. And the variations which are unfavorable, those animals would be eliminated from the environment. So, this is what nature itself does. Do you get it? Okay. Now, when nature selects those favorable organisms, then what do we say? Because of the struggle for existence and because of the varying environment, that is because of all the struggles, those organisms which overcomes all this would be the one which would be fit to survive on this environment. Do you get it? That's what it means, survival of the fittest. So those which can withstand the adverse conditions and then survive, those are the fittest. Now these fit organisms, what will happen? They will inherit the acquired characters. Yes, and these characters, as they get accumulated over the years, they will lead to the origin of a new species. Do you get it? Yes. So, an example, this is a snake in which you find variations, maybe like a creamish shell, the other one brown. Do you get it? So best suited for the environment, because the environmental, when they are on the ground, it matches the color with the soil. So those would survive from the enemies, where there is the one with a cream color would be more visible for a predator, and they may not be surviving. So these brown shelled ones survive, and what will happen, they will transfer the characters to the next, and this gets accumulated over the years, and they can lead to a new species. Okay. Next is Lamarck's theory, and we call that as Lamarckism. Now, according to Lamarckism, he had also done a number of experiments, and he has also published varying papers in which he has comprised all his findings. And according to him, his theory is known as the inheritance of acquired character, or we also call it as use and disuse theory, or Lamarckism. So according to him, what are the principles of Lamarckism? According to him, it is said that the individual which has the urge to survive, which has an urge to live. What happens is they do have, that is, they do the respective works. You understand? They do. That is the urge to survive. If they need, then naturally they have to do some work to get their food. Do you get it? So that can lead to the use of certain organs of the body, and those organs can increase in size. And this particular organ which has increased in size would be the inherent ability of that particular organism. Do you get it? So one example to tell, though it is not in your book, these blacksmiths, when they use their biceps muscle more. So they have a well-developed bicep muscle compared to the normal man. Do you get it? So that is the urge. Then next he says the environment and new needs. Now there could be changes in the environment occurring. Change is a factor. Yes, so changes in the environment. Now these changes in the environment, according to the change in the environment, we have to survive. Yes, we have to adapt to that. Now please don't write in your exam. Let me just tell you. See now, because of this pandemic, what has happened? All of us have to be indoor. Schools are shut, but we cannot completely shut our books and sit at home. Yes? So according to the change in the environment, what happens? We have to change our method also. Yes? So this way of teaching, the online method of teaching, is a way to cope up with the change in the environment. Don't write that. I'm just trying to make you understand what is the environment changes and the new needs. So a change in the environment leads to a change in the organism if it has to survive. Do you understand? So those which survive will develop certain characters to survive in that adverse conditions. Rather, there's some adaptations. Okay. Next is the use and disuse theory. So use and disuse theory states that if a particular organ is, all these are interrelated. Okay. So if a particular organ is used constantly, then that organ would be well developed. Yes, and those which we do not use for a longer time, what happens? Slowly they will perish, or rather slowly they will be degenerated. And for this only he gave this example of the giraffe. So once these giraffes, they were shot with a short neck, but because of the adverse condition, like the availability of the food when it was reduced, what happened? That is, grasses were not much available, so they had to take the leaves from tall trees and to take those leaves they had to keep raising their neck, and as such the neck elongated, and this character is being transmitted to the next generation. So he says that since the neck was used much, that got elongated. Yes, so all this is to tell that is an urge within you to survive will help you to face the struggle, and that individual would survive. Do you get it? Okay. Then you have theory of inheritance of the acquired character. That is because of a change. This is also this example. Because of a change in the environment, there is a change in the character of that animal, and that character has been transmitted to the next generation, and that becomes the acquired character. So whatever character has been acquired during the course of the lifetime of that individual will be inherited by the next generation. Clear? That's about Lamarckism. Next we will go into see variations. So what is this variation? Now, variations are brought about only in those animals which undergo a sexual reproduction, because in this sexual reproduction there is the recombination of the genes, because the gametes, the male and the female gametes, when they fuse, you get the genes from two different individuals, there will be a recombination of the genes, and because of which there could be a change in the phenotype, the external appearance of the offsprings. There are offsprings which are different from that of the parent, and any of these changes that we see is what is called as the variation. And now we know that variation is a raw material for evolution. Get it? Okay. Coming to the types of variation, variations could be either somatic variation or germinal. Somatic variation, I've already told you about this, are those variations which occur in the cells, all the cells of our body except the reproductive cell. Do you get it? That is somatic variation. And those variation which occurs in the germinal cell or the gametes are known as the germinal variation. Now, germinal variation could be either continuous variations or they could be discontinuous variations. Now, continuous variations. Continuous variations means they are some minor variations which are found between the individuals living in a population. So, this is known as a fluctuating population. Now this change is seen because of they get the minor changes, they will get accumulated over the years. Yes, a gradual accumulation within the population can lead to that. For example, the height of an individual or the skin color of an individual, all these are continuous variations. Now, discontinuous variation means discontinuous. There is no continuity. It is all of a sudden there could be some changes which occurs in an organism. Now, sudden changes we've already seen it is because of mutation. So, mutations because of which there could be a sudden change. Examples are normally we have 5 fingers. In certain persons you find the 6th digit or the 6th finger. That is an example for discontinuous variation. Clear? Okay. Next is paleobotany. Paleobotany means it is that branch of science which deals with the recovery and the identification of the plant remains of geological past. That means it's more the fossils I told you. So this is paleobotany, means the fossils referring to the plants. Okay. Okay. So as the plants died over the years, they could be buried into the soil, and these, if it was on the rock or something, they could be impressions of that on the rock, which help us to study how the earlier plants were. Do you get it? Okay. Now what is the importance of this? This helps us to study about phylogeny and the evolution of plants. That is the ancestry. We can tell if if there was a common ancestry and from which the present plant has diverged or not. Then the historical approach to the plant kingdom. Then the classification of plants, and for descriptive and comparative anatomy. In all these fossils would help play an important role. And in 1 mark you can get the father of paleobotany is who is this? Caspar Maria von Sternberg. The father of Indian paleobotany is Birbal Sahani. Okay. Next is fossilization. Fossilization means the formation of the fossils on rocks. Now we have different methods of fossilization. Yes. So first one is petrifaction. Petrifaction means what happens is there would be minerals which would penetrate into the tissues of the plants or the animals which are dead. Yes, so these minerals, when they penetrate, they become hardened and forms the fossils. Do you get it? So this sort of fossilization, petrification, would help in preserving the hard and the soft parts. Do you get it? In the case of animals, the bones, bones, they could be into which these minerals could have penetrated and then preserved them. Next method is molds and cast. Yes, mold and cast. So I've shown you the picture here. Molds and cast means whether it is an animal or a plant, they could be, you could have the impressions of those plants on the rocks, on the rock, because of the heavy pressure. Once these plants or animals have died, they could have given an impression on these rocks. Yes, so this impression would create a hollow space based on its shape. There would be an equivalent depression or a space created, which is called as the mold. Yes, so this mold will help us to give an idea of the original plant or the animal. Do you get it? But this can only tell you the outer shape, but not the internal structure. Now, sometimes what happens is, into the shape, there could be some of the minerals or sediments that can fill up, and then you find a structure, a solid structure, and we call that as the cast. Do you get it? That also tells us about the shape. Yes, so this is one method. Next method that we have is known as, I will come to carbonization later. We'll have about preservation. Yes, preservation. Preservation means by nature itself, we find that in some of the trees there are some, the sap. Yes, sap, which is called as the amber, in which some of the insects could have been trapped, or in the eyes you could have some animals being trapped, and these whether it be the sap or the eyes, they will preserve the entire animal or the plant, which helps us to study the evolution. Okay, then we have compression. Compression means some of the organisms, when they die, the hard parts of these animals, yes, especially the aquatic animals, they could settle down to the bottom, of the sea, where they would remain, and they would be covered by the sediments. So these sediments, what happens is a layer would be formed, and on top of that another layer would be formed. So it gets accumulated over the years. So this is what is called as compression. You get it? And then see, you have the fish remains, how it is. Then another method is infiltration or replacement. That is, in infiltration what happens is the mineral contents which are present, they can enter or infiltrate the cell wall, and as a result of that, minerals means like example silica, calcium carbonate, all these. As a result of this, what happens is the hard parts of the animal or the living system, they would be dissolved completely, and they would be, in place of that, it would be replaced by this minerals. Do you get it? That is called as infiltration. Then next is carbonization. So this is a method to find out the age of the fossil. The radiocarbon dating method is, so carbonization, they are the carbon content which is present in the living system. So what happens is, this helps to preserve the organism, and based on the amount of the carbon content, the radioactive element, we know that they get decayed over the course of time. Is based on the amount that is being decayed, we'll be able to tell the age of the particular living system. So that is called as the radiocarbon dating. Do you get it? Yes, the determination of the age of fossils. Next we have ethnobotany. Now ethnobotany means it is the study of the regional plants which are of certain practical use as per the traditional system. You get it? And this was coined by Harshberger. Now the importance of this is the traditional use of plants. We know certain medicinal plants which we do not know. Earlier they did know the medicinal value of that. Yes, the traditional use of the plants can be known. Information of known and unknown plants are available. Then this is useful for chemists, pharmacologists, then practitioners of herbal medicines, Siddha, Ayurveda and all that. Then tribal communities who have a good knowledge about ethnomedical parts, the varying parts of a plant like leaves, tubers or whichever it is, which is used for the treatment of various diseases. And then we have astrobiology, which actually deals with the origin and evolution and the distribution of life in the universe. Now this helps us to tell about the region where life exists. Yes, the existence of life. And the existence of life, according to this, it is said that there should be a correct mass so as to exist in this atmosphere. Yes, so right mass to retain an atmosphere, and this is what is referred to as Goldilocks zone for life. You get it? Yes. So with that, I finish this chapter.